What happens when a grandmother waits years to meet the grandchildren she loves from afar, only to receive a message that shatters her hope? The truth behind one family's silence will leave you breathless. Eleanor Morrison woke to the sound of rain ticking softly against the attic window. She lay still, listening to the patter, reluctant to move from the warm cocoon of her faded quilt. For a moment, she let herself imagine another day, another year, when mornings started with laughter and little feet pattering down the hallway. But that was long ago, before distance, emotional and physical, settled over her life like dust. She sat up slowly, joints protesting. The attic had been her sanctuary for months now. Since her daughter, Julia, stopped calling, Eleanor spent more and more time sorting boxes, labeling old family photos, and leafing through letters bound with brittle ribbon. The attic was cramped but filled with the treasures of a life. Her husband's war medals, her children's drawings, yellowed report cards, and birthday cards from birthdays long past. Eleanor's home was quiet now. Downstairs, the clock in the hallway chimed the hour, but she ignored it, lost in a stack of photos. Her children at the county fair, a snapshot of Julia on her first day of kindergarten, a faded picture of Eleanor herself holding her son at the hospital. In all of them, there was a sense of closeness, of days when family ties felt unbreakable. Her phone, an old flip model, buzzed on the windowsill. Eleanor glanced at it, just another robocall. She tossed it aside, unwilling to hope for the voice she wanted most to hear. It had been almost a year since Julia last visited, and even longer since their calls had been anything but stilted, careful conversations. The last time Julia came, there was talk of work, the children's school schedules, the price of gas, never of the rift that had grown between them. The kitchen downstairs was spotless, as always. Eleanor's hands moved automatically, making tea, setting out a plate of store-bought cookies, humming an old lullaby. She glanced at the calendar, a patchwork of family birthdays and anniversaries. Under today's date, she had written, "Call Julia," in determined script. She dialed her daughter's number, her heart quickening. Voicemail. She left a message, voice trembling. "It's Mom. Just calling to say hello. Hope you're well. Give the kids my love." No reply came. She watered the violets in the window, dusted the mantel, and watched the rain streak down the glass. Her friend Dorothy called, inviting her for cards that evening. Eleanor hesitated, then agreed. Anything to keep her mind from wandering back to Julia. Before leaving, Eleanor walked past the guest room, once Julia's, then a playroom for children who never came. On the dresser, a box waited. Inside, hand-knit sweaters and tiny booties, a rag doll Eleanor made years ago for grandchildren she'd only seen in Christmas photos. She stroked the yarn, whispering the names of children she knew only from holiday cards and short, polite texts. At Dorothy's house, the conversation was lively. Stories of noisy Thanksgivings, grandchildren's report cards, photos passed around the table. Eleanor smiled, nodded, shared stories of Julia's childhood but sidestepped questions about visits and calls. She laughed at the right moments, but inside felt the hollow ache of missing too much, of never being asked to join in the joy that filled her friends' lives. Returning home after dark, Eleanor made a pot of chamomile tea and curled up in the armchair by the window. She watched the rain fall, the streetlights painting golden pools on the wet road. Before bed, she checked her phone once more. No missed calls. She set the phone down with a sigh, brushing her fingers over the keys. Her home was full of echoes, voices, laughter, arguments, apologies. All she wanted now was one message, one sign that the door to her family hadn't closed for good. That night, Eleanor drifted to sleep remembering Julia as a little girl, her hand tucked in Eleanor's, asking endless questions about the world. The attic creaked in the wind, a reminder of all the memories Eleanor still carried, some cherished, some heavy, all waiting for the warmth of family to return. The next morning, Eleanor rose before dawn, unable to shake the old ache that had settled in her chest. She wandered the house in slippers, her every step stirring dust motes in the still air. She paused in the living room, letting her fingers rest on the piano keys, a habit from the days when Julia would practice Für Elise, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. The silence in the house pressed in, made louder by her memories. After a simple breakfast of toast and marmalade, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, pen in hand, and began to write a letter to Julia. She avoided words like miss or lonely, focusing instead on stories about the garden, the neighbor's new puppy, the daffodils pushing up by the fence. She described Dorothy's card night, hoping the ordinary details might bridge the widening gap between them. Midway through the letter, her phone rang. Eleanor's heart leapt, only to see Dorothy's name. She answered anyway, grateful for any conversation. Dorothy chatted about plans for an upcoming church fundraiser, the price of eggs, and her grandson's first baseball game. She asked if Eleanor had heard from Julia, her voice gentle but probing. Eleanor offered a practiced answer. Not lately, but I'm sure she's just busy with the children. Dorothy sympathized, but Eleanor sensed the unspoken comparison to Dorothy's own noisy, crowded house, always overflowing with grandchildren. After the call, Eleanor returned to her letter. She finished it with a careful, hopeful note. Give the children a kiss from Grandma, and walked to the postbox down the street to send it. The crisp air felt good on her cheeks, and the sky was a clean blue, but the sight of strollers and toddlers with their mothers tugged at her heart. Back home, Eleanor cleaned out the hall closet, sorting through raincoats, boots, and a shoebox labeled Julia's school things. She found Julia's faded report cards, stick figure drawings, and a third-grade Mother's Day card. I love you, Mommy, because you always listen. Eleanor pressed the card to her chest, the words burning with longing. Later, she prepared a simple lunch, eating alone at the kitchen table. She checked her phone, hoping for a reply to her voicemail or the letter she'd mailed. Nothing. She considered calling again, but imagined the disappointment of voicemail and let her hand fall. Instead, she called her son, Patrick, who lived 3 states away. Patrick answered on the second ring, warm but hurried. Hi, Mom. Sorry, can't talk long. The twins have soccer and I'm coaching. They spoke briefly. Patrick asked after her health, promised to visit in the fall, sent love from his family. Eleanor listened to the chaos in the background, the shouts of children, the thud of a ball against the garage. She hung up feeling both loved and left behind. The afternoon dragged. Eleanor sorted laundry, watched a quiz show on television, and watered her violets. She composed a short email to Julia, just a cheerful greeting, a photo of the violets in bloom, nothing demanding or heavy. She hesitated before sending, afraid of seeming needy, but clicked send anyway. As dusk approached, Eleanor stepped into the attic. She sorted through another box, this one filled with Christmas ornaments, some hand-painted by Julia in kindergarten. Each item was a memory, a popsicle stick reindeer, a paper angel, a cracked plastic bauble with Julia's name written in glitter. Eleanor wiped each one clean, setting them aside for someday, though she wasn't sure when or if that day would come. After dinner, Eleanor bundled up for a walk, passing Dorothy's house and waving at the lighted window. She wandered the quiet streets, watching other families through their windows, laughter, the flicker of a TV, the silhouettes of children racing through living rooms. She returned home to her own pool of lamplight, made tea, and curled up with her knitting. Before bed, Eleanor checked her phone one last time. Still no reply. She placed the phone on the nightstand and climbed under the quilt, the weight of unsent words and unmet grandchildren pressing in on her heart. Eleanor awoke to a rare burst of sunlight streaming across her bedroom wall. For a moment, the brightness felt like a promise. She hurried through her morning routine, checking the mailbox before breakfast. Nothing yet from Julia. She shrugged it off, telling herself that mail was always slow in the spring. Still, every part of her day seemed shaped by anticipation. Determined not to drift into sadness, Eleanor decided to visit the local craft fair. She pulled on her raincoat, found her woven market bag, and caught the early bus to the community center. Inside, the building buzzed with chatter and laughter. Tables overflowed with painted mugs, knitted scarves, children's artwork, and jars of homemade preserves. Eleanor ran into Mrs. Allen, her old neighbor, who beamed. "How are the grandkids, Eleanor? Do they visit much?" Eleanor hesitated, then offered her practiced smile. "Not as much as I'd like, but I'm sure we'll see each other soon." Mrs. Allen nodded knowingly, launching into a story about her own grandchildren's school recital. Eleanor listened, her mind elsewhere. At the pottery booth, Eleanor chose 2 painted mugs, one with bluebells, the other with bright red cardinals. She imagined gifting them to Julia and her children, picturing little hands wrapped around warm cocoa on a snowy morning. She paid the vendor, her heart tightening at the thought of a family gathering that remained only in her imagination. Back home, Eleanor set the mugs on the kitchen table and made herself lunch. She ate in silence, her gaze drifting to the phone beside her plate. She checked her email, hoping for a new message from Julia. Only a newsletter and a coupon for cleaning supplies waited in her inbox. In the afternoon, Eleanor planted tulip bulbs in the front garden, pressing her fingers into the cool soil. As she worked, a neighbor's daughter, Katie, stopped at the gate. "Can I help?" Katie asked, grinning. Eleanor handed her a trowel, and together they dug holes for the bulbs, laughing at the worms wriggling in the earth. For an hour, the garden was alive with chatter and hope. When they finished, Katie hugged her goodbye and dashed off, leaving Eleanor with a bittersweet ache, so close to the grandchild moment she yearned for. Inside, Eleanor washed her hands and found herself drawn once again to the attic. She organized boxes of board games, puzzles, and picture books, saved for future visits that never happened. Each item was a reminder of plans made and promises not kept. As dusk gathered, Eleanor called Julia's number again. This time, the phone rang until it reached voicemail. Eleanor hesitated, then left a short message. "Thinking of you and the children. Hope you're all well. Call when you can." She spent the evening with a new book from the craft fair, her mind wandering from the story to the empty guest room upstairs. The night pressed in, full of shadows and longing. Before bed, Eleanor found herself at the window, staring out at the darkened street. A single porch light glowed across the way, casting gold on the wet pavement. She picked up her phone, checked for messages, then set it back down. She whispered a soft goodnight to the quiet house, to her memories, and to the grandchildren she still hoped to meet. Sunday dawned overcast and cool, the promise of spring dampened by lingering clouds. Eleanor lingered over breakfast, stirring her tea and rereading a letter from her sister in Vermont, who filled her pages with news of grandchildren's birthdays, family hikes, and noisy Sunday dinners. Eleanor smiled, imagining the bustle, but the ache in her chest deepened. She decided to spend the morning rearranging the guest room. The bedsheets were freshly laundered, the windows washed. She set out the dolls and trucks she'd carefully collected over the years, gifts for birthdays that had come and gone, unopened and untouched. She dusted the bookshelf, flipping through picture books and chapter books, her fingers tracing inscriptions. "To my darling grandchild, with love, Grandma Eleanor." The doorbell rang mid-morning. Heart leaping, Eleanor rushed downstairs, only to find Dorothy on the porch, clutching a tin of cinnamon rolls. "Baked too many again," Dorothy declared, her voice bright. They sat in the kitchen, the warmth of coffee and pastry easing the quiet. Dorothy shared photos from her grandson's soccer game, showed off a finger painting he'd made. Eleanor admired them, offering sincere praise, but her own photos were years old and well-worn. Dorothy glanced at the unused guest room and asked, gently, "Any news from Julia?" Eleanor forced a smile. "Not yet, but maybe soon. I sent her a letter last week." Dorothy squeezed her hand. "She'll come around. Children always do, eventually." They changed the subject, talking about the upcoming church rummage sale, neighbors' gardens, the trouble with birds nesting in the eaves. When Dorothy left, Eleanor walked through her quiet house, the cinnamon scent lingering in the hall. She set aside half the pastries for the freezer, the rest on a plate for tea. As she sipped, her eyes lingered on the phone, willing it to ring. She spent the afternoon tending the front garden, clipping dead branches and pulling weeds. Neighbors waved as they passed, and one little boy, riding his scooter, skidded to a stop at her mailbox. "Hi, Miss Morrison. My grandma says you make the best cookies." Eleanor laughed, promising to bake a batch for his family next week. Inside, Eleanor wrote postcards to her niece in Chicago and an old college friend in Maine, sharing news about the garden, the craft fair, and Dorothy's cinnamon rolls. She tried to keep her words light, but as she signed her name, she added a quiet confession. "I miss Julia and the children. I hope I hear from them soon." As twilight fell, Eleanor prepared a small supper, setting the table for one. She tuned the radio to her favorite classical station and let the music fill the house. She ate slowly, watching the sky darken through the kitchen window, the lamplight glowing in the guest room upstairs. Before bed, Eleanor checked her email, nothing from Julia. She scrolled through old messages, rereading the brief notes Julia sent at holidays or in reply to a birthday card. Her inbox was a patchwork of polite exchanges, never quite reaching the heart of things. Eleanor washed the teacup, folded the dish towel, and made her way upstairs. She paused at the guest room, glancing in one last time. The bedsheets were perfectly smooth, the toys arranged, the books stacked neatly on the shelf. She closed the door gently, her heart heavy with the sound of things left unsaid. That night, Eleanor lay awake, listening to the soft drip of rain on the roof, wondering how many unopened doors, real and imagined, stood between her and the family she loved. Monday began with the chime of Eleanor's phone, an early text from Patrick. "Morning, Mom. Sending hugs from the twins. Hope you have a wonderful week." Eleanor smiled, picturing her son's boisterous family, then typed a quick reply. "Thank you, love. Give everyone a kiss from Grandma." She tucked her phone in her pocket, her spirits buoyed by the smallest connection. Inspired, Eleanor decided to bake oatmeal cookies for Dorothy's grandkids, as promised. The kitchen filled with the sweet scent of cinnamon and raisins, and she hummed along to the radio, remembering the days when Julia sat at the counter, licking the spoon and asking endless questions. By noon, the cookies were cooling on wire racks. Eleanor boxed up a dozen and set out for Dorothy's, sharing a pleasant hour on the sun-dappled porch, watching neighborhood children race their bikes in the street. Returning home, Eleanor found the afternoon empty. She sat at the dining table, carefully folding a fresh letter to Julia. This time, she wrote with honest longing. "I miss you. I miss your voice, and I want to know the children. Please let me be part of your lives. My door is always open." She slipped a photo inside, one of Julia as a child, grinning on the beach, and walked to the postbox, her steps measured, hope and fear balanced in her chest. That evening, Eleanor called her sister in Vermont, the familiar voice of Mom. They spoke for an hour, trading family news, laughing at old memories. When her sister asked about Julia, Eleanor's voice wavered. "It's been a long time," she confessed. "I keep reaching out, but nothing comes back." Her sister listened quietly, then offered gentle encouragement. "Don't give up. Sometimes hearts change slowly." After the call, Eleanor made herself tea and settled in her armchair with a book, but the words blurred before her eyes. Restless, she tidied the house, fluffing pillows, refolding towels, watering the violets, all the small acts that gave her a sense of control. At dusk, she pulled out her old photo albums, paging through birthdays, school plays, holidays, and vacations. Each photo was a door to another time, another version of her family. As darkness settled over the house, Eleanor checked her email. The usual mix: newsletters, sale ads, a note from the church secretary. Nothing from Julia. She scrolled through her phone, rereading her last message, wondering if she'd said too much or not enough. She considered calling again, but decided to wait. She washed her teacup, brushed her teeth, and changed into her nightgown. As she pulled back the covers, her phone buzzed on the nightstand, an unfamiliar notification. Heart thumping, Eleanor picked it up. There, glowing on the screen, was a new message. It was from Julia. Eleanor stared at it for a long moment, afraid to open it, afraid of both what it might say and what it might not. She took a breath, pressed the button, and began to read. Eleanor's hands shook as she scrolled to the start of Julia's message. The words seemed cold and formal, stripped of affection. "Mother, I received your letters. I know you want to meet the children, but I have to be honest. I'm not comfortable with that right now. Too much has happened, and I need space. Please respect my wishes. I'll reach out if and when I feel ready." The room seemed to tilt as Eleanor read and reread the lines. She tried to find warmth between the sentences, some sign that this was just a rough patch or a misunderstanding. But there was no comfort in the digital reply, no trace of the little girl who used to race home after school with arms wide open. For a long time, Eleanor sat motionless, phone heavy in her lap. The clock ticked in the hallway. Outside, neighborhood children shrieked with laughter, chasing a ball down the sidewalk, their joy as sharp and distant as another life. She stood up, wandered from room to room, unsure what to do with herself. The house felt too large. Every object waited with memory. She passed the unopened box of toys, the guest room made up and waiting, the kitchen table with the painted mugs she bought for a visit that would not happen. At noon, Dorothy called to invite her for lunch, but Eleanor declined, her voice flat. "Not today, thank you. I'm a little tired." Dorothy understood. "I'm here if you want to talk, dear." Eleanor sat by the window, letting the late sun warm her face. Her mind replayed the message over and over, each word echoing with finality. She wondered if she should reply. Should she defend herself, apologize again, promise to do better? Or should she do as Julia asked, stepping back, leaving the door open but not pushing anymore? She tried to distract herself by pulling weeds in the garden, scrubbing the already clean counters, reorganizing the linen closet. But nothing could shake the heaviness that pressed on her chest. She made tea and let it grow cold on the kitchen table. As evening settled, Eleanor opened the attic and stood among the boxes, running her hand along the dusty spines of old storybooks. She lingered over the doll she'd made, the tiny sweater she'd knitted, the puzzles and picture books, each a wish for a relationship that had never begun. She returned downstairs and wrote in her journal for the first time in weeks. The words poured out. Her sorrow, her confusion, her memories of Julia as a child, her hopes for forgiveness, her longing for family. She wrote until her hand cramped, then closed the book, pressing it to her chest. When night fell, Eleanor lit a candle, sat in her armchair, and allowed herself to cry, quiet, steady tears that left her feeling empty, but somehow a little lighter. The message from Julia sat unread on her phone, but Eleanor left it there, a painful boundary she could not change. She washed her face, turned out the lights, and slipped beneath her quilt. As sleep crept in, she whispered a promise to herself. I will love her, from a distance if I must. I will hold space, even in the silence. Morning brought a gray hush. Eleanor lay in bed for a long while, listening to the gentle patter of rain on the roof, feeling the heavy ache of loss settle deeper in her bones. She made tea and sat by the window, staring out at the garden, tulips just beginning to open, their colors bright against the drab sky. The message from Julia replayed in her mind, every word sharp and cold. Eleanor resisted the urge to reply, respecting her daughter's request for distance, but the silence felt like a wall she didn't know how to scale. She tried to fill the day. Dorothy called again, persistent and warm. This time, Eleanor answered. Come for breakfast. I'll bring pastries, Dorothy offered. Eleanor agreed, and soon Dorothy arrived with a paper bag of sweet rolls and the latest neighborhood gossip. They ate at the kitchen table, Dorothy telling funny stories about her grandchildren, drawing reluctant smiles from Eleanor. When Dorothy noticed Eleanor's quiet, she reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're not alone, you know. Families, they go through things. Sometimes, all you can do is keep your heart open. After Dorothy left, Eleanor pulled out her knitting needles, working on a scarf for the church charity drive. The rhythm of the yarn and needles soothed her, giving her hands something to do while her mind wandered. By afternoon, the rain let up. Eleanor put on her boots and walked to the library, where she chatted with Mrs. Allen about books and upcoming events. She checked out a novel, glad for an excuse to lose herself in someone else's story for a while. At home, she dusted the shelves in the guest room, not out of hope but habit. She rearranged the toys and books, telling herself that even if Julia and the grandchildren never came, the room could still be a place of comfort, a space for memories and quiet dreams. That evening, Patrick called, his voice warm and reassuring. He listened as Eleanor described the message from Julia, offering gentle sympathy but no easy answers. I'm so sorry, Mom. I wish I could make it better, Patrick said. Just hearing your voice helps, Eleanor replied, grateful for his steadiness. The call ended with promises to visit soon and hugs sent down the phone line. Dinner was simple, soup and crackers, eaten while listening to the radio. Afterward, Eleanor sat at her desk, writing letters to friends, sharing small joys and daily happenings, refusing to let her world shrink to the size of her sorrow. Before bed, she paused at the attic stairs, gazing upward but deciding to leave the boxes untouched for now. She lit her candle, sipped chamomile tea, and let the hush of night settle in. In the dark, Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself and whispered a silent prayer, not for things to go back to how they were, but for the strength to keep loving, to keep hoping, even when everything seemed lost. As spring edged toward summer, Eleanor's house changed in small, steady ways. She opened the windows each morning, letting fresh air sweep out the stale sorrow of long winter months. Sunlight painted warm patches on the wooden floors, and the scent of lilacs drifted in from the garden. She tended her flowers each day, coaxing color and life from the earth. Eleanor kept herself busy. She volunteered for the church rummage sale, helping price donated knickknacks, and chatting with neighbors about old recipes and family news. At the library book club, she discovered new stories, losing herself for hours in fictional worlds that offered both escape and comfort. Dorothy and Mrs. Allen visited often. They brought pastries and laughter, filling Eleanor's kitchen with warmth. Sometimes Katie, the neighbor's daughter, stopped by after school to help in the garden or listened to Eleanor's stories about when her own Julia was little. Their gentle company softened the ache in Eleanor's chest, reminding her that she was still needed and known. Every so often, Eleanor found herself lingering in the guest room, smoothing the quilts, dusting the shelves, straightening the toys and books. The door stayed open now, the sunlight pouring in. She no longer waited for the sound of Julia's car in the driveway, but she held close the hope that love could change shape, that, even from a distance, it could still endure. Eleanor continued to write letters to her friends and to Patrick's children, sometimes tucking in a recipe or a pressed flower from the garden. She told them about her violets and the new book she was reading, about Dorothy's funny stories, and about the kindness she found in small, everyday moments. On quiet evenings, Eleanor lit her candle and sat with her knitting or journal, the house peaceful around her. The message from Julia remained on her phone, a wound and a boundary, but it no longer defined her days. Instead, Eleanor let in light wherever she could, letting grief settle in its own corner while she filled the rest of her home with laughter, good food, and gentle hope. As the season turned, neighbors' children played in the street, and the scent of cut grass drifted through the open window. Eleanor watched them from her porch, feeling sadness and gratitude mingling in her chest. She whispered a blessing for Julia and the grandchildren she might never meet, a promise to love them, however quietly, from the distance they required. That night, as Eleanor climbed into bed, she found peace in the steady rhythms of her life, the slow, sure turning of seasons, the persistence of hope, and the knowledge that her heart, though bruised, was still open to whatever joy the world had left to offer.